So Prabhupada stresses in the book distribution ki jai. Kantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premananda. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Bhagavate
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, the Summum Bonum, Chapter 72, the slaying of the demon Jarasandha. Text number 11. Nakaschid matparam loke
Matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Tejasa yasaya shriya
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopi kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha
Nakaschin matparam loke
Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopi kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha
Nakaschin matparam loke
Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopi kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha
Nakaschin matparam loke
Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopi kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha Nakaschin matparam loke
Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopim kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya Vibhuti bheva bhivavet Devopi kim upartivaha
Nakaschin matparam loke
Nakaschin matparam loke
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Tejasa yasasa shriya
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Vibhuti bheva bhivavet
Devopi kim upartivaha
Devopi kim upartivaha Nakaschin matparam loke Tejasa yasasa shriya Vibhuti bheva bhivavet Devopi kim upartivaha
Ladies,
Nakaschin matparam loke Tejasa yasasa shriya Vibhuti bheva bhivavet Devopi kim upartivaha Nakaschin matparam loke Tejasa yasasa shriya Vibhuti bheva bhivavet Devopi kim upartivaha Not
kaschit,
Kaschit
any person, mat, to me,
Param
one who is dedicated,
One who is dedicated
loke, in this world, Tejasa, by his strength, Yashasa, fame, Shriya, beauty, Vibhuti, opulences, Va, or Abhibavet, can overcome, Devaha,
Devaha,
a demigod,
Demigod,
a api,
api,
even,
Kim,
kim, what to speak of, Partivaha, a ruler of the earth.
ruler of the earth.
No one in this world, even a demigod, what to speak of an earthly king, can defeat my devotee with his strength, beauty, fame, or riches. Purport. Here Lord Krishna assures King Yudhisthira that he will have no problem conquering the worldly kings, since the king is a pure devotee, and the Lord's pure devotees can never be conquered, even by the demigods, what to speak of earthly kings. Although materialists are proud of their power, fame, beauty and opulence, they can never surpass the pure devotees of the Lord in any of these categories. Then we'll move on. Text 12. Shri Shukura Vacha Nishanya Bhagavad Gita Prita Pula Mukam Bujaha Pratrindik Vijaye Yukta Vishnu Tejo Paprimhitam. Sukadeva Goswami said, upon hearing these words sung by the Supreme Lord, King Yudhisthira became joyful, and his face blossomed like a lotus. Thus he sent forth his brothers who were empowered with Lord Vishnu's potency to conquer all directions. Sahadevam Dakshinasyam Adishad Sahasrinjayai Dishi Pratityam Nakulam Udityam Sabhyasarchinam Pratyam Rikodavam Matsyai Kikoyo Sahamadgagai. He sent Sahadev to the south with the Srinjayas, Nakula to the west with the Matsyas, Arjuna to the north with the Kekayas, and Bhima to the east with the Madrukas. Te vichityan ripam vila ajahru dibya ojasa ajata sattva bhuri dravinam nipadyakshate. After defeating many kings with their prowess, these heroic brothers brought back abundant wealth for Yudhisthira Maharaj, who was intent on performing the sacrifice of king. Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, it may be noted that by dispatching his younger brothers to conquer in different directions, King Yudhisthira did not actually intend that they declare war with the kings. Actually, the brothers started for different directions to inform the respective kings about King Yudhisthira's intention to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. The kings were thus informed that they were required to pay taxes for the execution of the sacrifice. This payment of taxes to Emperor Yudhisthira meant that the king accepted subjugation before him. In case of the king's refusal to act accordingly, there was certainly a fight. Thus, by their influence and strength, the brothers conquered all the kings in different directions, and they were able to bring in sufficient taxes and presentations. These were brought before King Yudhisthira by his brothers. So far, this is pretty much storyline, not a lot of philosophy here. So we will continue on. Text 15. Shrudvajitam jara sandam nripate jayato hari ato payam tim aveja udavo yam uvachaha. When King Yudhisthira heard that Jarasandha remained undefeated, he set to pondering. And then the Prime of the Lord, Hari, told him the means Uddhava had described for defeating Jarasandha. Bhimasena Arjuna Krishna Brahmaninga Tarastraya Jagmu Girivrajam Tata Brihadrata Suto Yataha. Thus Bhimasena, Arjuna and Krishna disguised themselves as Brahmanas and went to Giribraja, my dear king, where the son of Brihadrata was to be found. Te gatva titya velayam griheshu grihamedinam brahmanyam samyacheram brahmanyam samayacheram rajanya brahmalingina. Disguised as Brahmanas, the royal warriors approached Jarasandha at home during the appointed hour for receiving guests. They submitted their entreaty to that dutiful householder who was especially respectful to the Brahminical class. Purport. So Prabhupada writes, King Jarasandha was a very dutiful householder and he had great respect for the Brahmanas. He was a great fighter, a Kshatriya king, but he was never neglectful of the Vedic injunctions. According to Vedic injunctions, the Brahmanas are considered to be the spiritual masters of all other castes. Lord Krishna, Arjuna and Bhimsen were actually Kshatriyas, but they dressed themselves as Brahmanas. And at the time when King Jarasandha was to give charity to the Brahmanas and receive them as guests, they approached him. Text 18. Rajam vidahyati tin praptam artino duramagatam tamna prayatcha padram te yadvayam kamaya mahe. Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima said, O king, know us to be needy guests who have come to you from afar. We wish all good unto you. Please grant us whatever we desire. 19. Kim durmasham titikshunam kim kalyam ashaddubi kim nadeyam yadanyanam kapara samadarshinam. What can the tolerant not bear? They're puffing him up a bit. No? What will the wicked not do? In other words, you're not a wicked man. No? What will the generous not give in charity? And who will those of equal vision see as an outsider? Report. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna and the two Pandava brothers, Bhima and Arjuna, requested Jarasandha to grant them whatever they asked of him. Here, they explain why there is no need for them to specify their desire. The Acharyas comment on this verse as follows. Jarasandha might be thinking, what if you request my son, from whom separation would be intolerable? To this possible objection, Krishna and the Pandavas replied, for a tolerant person, nothing is intolerable. Similarly, Jarasandha could object, what if you ask me to give my body, or my precious jewels, and other ornaments which are meant to be given to my sons, not to ordinary beggars? To this they replied, "For the generous, what is not to be donated in charity?" In other words, everything is to be given. Jarasandha might also object that he could be giving charity to his enemies. To this, his guests counter with the statement, "Ka para samadarsinam." For those with equal vision, who was a stranger? Thus, Sri Krishna and the Pandavas encouraged Jarasandha to simply agree to grant their request without further discussion. Let's move on, shall we? Text 20. Yo nijena sharirena satangeyam yasodruvam nachinoti svayam kalpaha savajasucha eva saha. He indeed is to be censured and pitied who, though able to do so, fails to achieve with his temporary body the lasting fame glorified by great saints. Harishchandro Rantideva Unchavriti Shibir Bali Vyadha Kapoto Pahavo Hiyajuvena Druvam Gataha. Harishchandra, Rantidev, Uchabriti Mudgala, Shibi, Bali, the legendary hunter and pigeon, and many others have attained the permanent by means of the impermanent. Purport. Here Lord Krishna and the two Pandavas are pointing out to Jarasandha that one can use the temporary material body to achieve a permanent situation in life. Because Jarasandha was a materialist, they appealed to his natural interest in the heavenly planets, where life lasts so long that it appears permanent to people on earth. Srila Sridhar Swami briefly summarizes the history of the personalities mentioned in this verse. To pay off his debts to Vishwamitra, Harishchandra sold everything he had, including his wife and children. Yet, even after attaining the status of a Chandala, he did not become discouraged. Thus he went to heaven, together with all the inhabitants of Ayodhya. Rantidev, after going without even water for 48 days, somehow obtained some food and water, but then some beggars came and he gave it all away to them. In this way he attained Brahmaloka. Mudgala followed the practice of gathering grains left behind in the fields after the harvest. Yet still, he was hospitable toward uninvited guests, even after his family had been suffering in poverty for 6 months. Thus he also went to Brahmaloka. To protect a pigeon who had taken shelter of him, King Shibi gave his own flesh to a hawk and attained heaven. Bali Maharaj gave all his property to Lord Hari when the Lord disguised himself as a dwarf Brahmana, Vamanadeva. And so Bali gained the Lord's personal association. The pigeon and his mate gave their own flesh to a hunter as a show of hospitality, and thus they were taken to heaven in a celestial aeroplane. When the hunter understood their situation in the mode of goodness, he also became renounced, and thus he gave up hunting and went off to perform severe austerities. Because he was freed of all sins, after his body burned to death in a forest fire, he was elevated to heaven. Thus, many personalities have attained enduring life on higher planets by means of the temporary material body. Okay, I think we might finish there. Text 22 tomorrow. Om Jnana Tirindasya Gnana Salakaya Chakshurumilitam Sri Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vistam Stapitam Bhutale Swayam Bhagavadayam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam karoti vachalam Ambulam gayate girim Yat kripa tamam bande Shri Gurum Ditarinam. The thought comes to mind of the context in which these conversations are being exchanged. Initially, in the verses that we were looking at yesterday, the conversation was between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Krishna primarily, but in the setting where the Maharaj Yudhishthira was surrounded by his entourage, his ministers, his brothers, his friends, and it mentions the acharyas, so also his gurus. And of course, deference in that context is given to Krishna, because everybody's a devotee. But interesting to note that in that situation, it wasn't just Yudhishthira by himself making decisions, but rather the saintly kings, or the emperor in this particular case, wasn't making decisions unilaterally or devoid of, context. The king, the saintly kings, were following the advice and the guidance and ultimately the protection of the Brahmanas, especially the Brahmanas. And so the culture or the society or the environment within which the devotees were living impacted their decision making, influenced their discussions. So even though the king is the leader, and in this particular case, Yudhishthira Maharaj is to be crowned as the emperor as part of the Rajasuya sacrifice. The emperor doesn't exist in isolation to context. And of course, part of the context is also culture. So, Krishna, Arjuna and Yudhishthira are leveraging the culture that was Even though Jarasanda's a materialist, right, not a devotee, still he's part of that Vedic, or what we call Vedic construct, right, where the Brahmanas are given prominence. And even though they eschew position, titles, ideally, still they're respected. You know, in that context, yesterday, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, the Brahminical, the Brahmanas, what's one of the, Samo, Tamas, Tapaso, Chanti Rajavamevacha, Jnanam Vijnanam, Ashtikyam, Rama Kama Svabhavajam. Right. So, the Brahmanas are aloof from position, if you like. The king has the position, but actually higher than the king is the Brahmanas, are the Brahmanas. And of course the Brahmanas are renounced. Jantir Arjavam. Arjavam means simplicity. Astikya is culture. Right? Astikya is the culture within the Brahminical class exists. So even though they don't necessarily have a position, formal position, well actually they do have a formal position, but it's not like the king, you know, in the procession with the, although, you know, we know Vedic culture actually there's a lot of show, isn't there? The Brahmanas wear those in Mayapur, the Brahmanas wear those fancy turbans and fold their dhotis very nicely, wear their chadar in a particular way. Vedic culture, there's quite a bit of show going on. But it's cultural, it's cultured, it's not. The Brahmanas broadly, because we see what happens when one becomes proud of one's position, what happens? Often, we see in the context of the Bhagavatam. What happened to Durvasa Muni when he got proud?
Fell down.
Saiswara of the universe, right?
Yeah, got his tail singed by the Sudarsana chakra. Which is interesting. The king can be allowed to show off a bit, but the Brahmanas should be very mild, I guess, is a description of the character of a Brahmana. Right? Equal to everybody, Sama, right? Sama. Pandita Samadarshanaha. As Bhagavad Gita describes a lot of the characteristics of a devotee, and a devotee automatically acquires the qualities of a Brahmana. Right? And because a Brahmana has all of these desirable and respectable, right? Equal to everybody, so friendly to everybody, dhammas. Dhamma is sense-controlled, austere, tapa, samodhamas tapa, socham, pure, externally and internally pure-hearted. and especially for the devotees. We were discussing yesterday that purity of heart means a servant of Krishna. Dhamma means sense-controlled through sadhana and seva, right? Sadhana and service. So in that sense, and socham, socham, pure of heart. Chantir means tolerant, right? Tolerant. Chantir arjivam means simple living. Jnanam vijnanam astikyam. Prabhupada translates astikyam as supporting Vedic culture. And jnanam means learned. Study, the Brahmanas meant to study and teach. Huh? And that learning has to be more than just book knowledge. Huh? Book knowledge is good, but if you don't know how to apply it, it's useless. Huh? Just like, we get the kids to recite Bhagavad Gita slokas, a bit like parrots, right? And then you ask them, what does that mean? And go, what? But we can recite verses, but we're supposed to know what they mean. And not only should we know what they mean, but we need to know also how to apply them. Kala desha patra, time, place, circumstance, right? And that's an art. And that usually comes from maturity. Not just from some theoretical understanding. And that's why context and culture is so important. So that we can understand, the setting, the environment. And when we understand the environment that a person exists in, their influences and their samskaras, effectively. It's culture, right? Then we can instruct or guide an individual appropriately. Culture's interesting. Not all conflicts, but often conflicts, especially within ISKCON, is about culture. Not always, but often. And the study of culture is actually a discipline that's manifest, I guess, fairly recently. Because, especially within ISKCON, we have cultural diversity, right? And it impacts how we deal with each other. Aussies think and act in a particular way because of their upbringing. And people from India think and act in a different way. Right? Have you noticed? Right? And even within India, right? A Bengali is different to a Gujarati. Have you noticed? Yeah. Yeah. India is not homogeneous. What to speak of the fact that you've got Fijian Indians, you've got Malaysian Indians, you've got South African Indians, right? You've even got Kiwi Indians. Right? And they're all different. Broadly, they're the same. We're all the same. Right? Pandita Samadashanaha. Right? We all see everybody equally. But we also know that culture influences an individual and how they think and how they act, what they expect, what their motivations and what their goals are, even in life. Because we know that we've taken birth in a particular place at a particular time, in a given circumstance, because of desires that have been cultivated, I guess you could say, or accumulated as a result of desire for lifetimes. This is how Adelaide looks. So it's interesting here, and probably not. I have a book at home that I bought some years ago. It's 20 years old, but it's called the Cultural Diversity Desktop Reference. It's a huge book, and with a CD in this book. But, and the reason why this is an issue is because broadly across the globe we have these multinational organisations, and they're made up of people from different cultures. And guess what? They clash. Because of the different expectations, because of the different experience, because of the different culture. Right? They have problems because of culture and because people don't understand it. Right? And we have that in ISKCON. So I'm thinking next few years, make a study, because it's understood Asians think differently to Caucasians. Right? And even within that setting, there are subsets. Right? Australians are generally considered to be coarse. Right? Send them back to Australia. Because they're very upfront. You know, they'll say what they think. Whereas, especially say an Indian, won't say what they think. They'll sidle up to something. They won't say it directly. Have you noticed? Yeah. But, and it's, Aussies are used to living in big spaces, and you know, they walk around like they own a joint and say rude things to people and get away with it, apparently. But, you know, so anyway, interesting, it's broadly understood, and you know, the academics of the world have analysed these things and broken them down into characteristics and motivations, goals, you know, that are broadly accepted by a culture. So interesting to see here, the cultural setting is important for how Jarasandha accepts Krishna, Arjuna and Yudhishthira. Was it Bhima? Bhima, not Yudhishthira, Bhima, right? They're dressed as Brahmanas, but he can tell they're not Brahmanas. But still, because they're dressed as Brahmanas, the culture is so strongly ingrained within Jarasandha that he has to respect them. Well, he has to, he can't not respect them. And of course, it appears here that they're coming with some philosophical gobbledygook. Right? That's what it looks like. They're just giving him fancy words to have him be respectful, but not actually ask what they want. Right? And tell him, it's an honourable thing to give in charity. And just see how these personalities became famous and appealing to his Kshatriya nature, right? You'll become famous if you give us what we want. Leveraging his inclination to serve the Brahmanas, which is always good, right? Always good to serve the Brahmanas, but of course we do have to be careful at the same time, right? We're here to serve, but at the same time we don't want to be exploited. Hands up if you like being exploited, right? Who likes being cheated in life? Okay, nobody. No, we don't. So, it's interesting, isn't it, that Bhima, Arjuna and Krishna are coming as cheats. It's sort of, what's going on here? Huh? But of course there's a purpose. And it's interesting, you see, the decision has been made to do this because of the advice that's come from Uddhava. Isn't it? It's the advice that Uddhava has given. We can appeal to Jarasanda's Kshatriya spirit and his tendency to serve the Brahmanas and to give in charity. And of course, it's an opportunity for the Kshatriyas to fight. It's a characteristic we see in time and time, I mentioned this yesterday, but time and time again, we see within this culture, Kshatriyas fighting all the time. Something that we perhaps we don't see pure Kshatriyas. In this day and age, we don't see pure Kshatriyas. And so fighting is, in one sense, abhorrent to most people. And especially because in wars, who ends up getting killed? Who ends up getting killed in most wars these days?
Infantry.
Yeah, just your plebs. And not only that, now the civilians, innocent civilians who just should not be caught up in warfare. Right? So the roles of the Kshatriyas have been, Prabhupada explains, the roles of the Kshatriyas have been taken over by less qualified men. And so they do all sorts of atrocities. And so war is seen as atrocious, and it is, because if the infantrymen and the citizens are being killed, this is not Kshatriya, this is just nonsense. Right? And here we've got a Kshatriya. The Kshatriyas would fight, and they would go somewhere where the innocent citizens wouldn't be hurt, wouldn't be harmed. And if there was a challenge, they would fight according to rules. So it's interesting that Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima and Jarasandha are working within this context where the Brahmanas are highly respected and not meant to cheat. Yet they're cheating. So, there's some nuance in the application of the culture. And of course, the end result is to have Jarasandha submit ultimately to Maharaj Yudhisthira as the emperor, and ultimately to Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because that's the example that Yudhishthira Maharaj and his brothers, as the Kshatriya kings, are demonstrated to everybody. Be a devotee. And of course, that's the king's responsibility. Broadly, in Vedic culture, is to see that everybody is engaged in some sadhana according to their varna and according to their ashram, so that there's that connection again with Krishna. But of course, Jarasandha, he's a demon, so he's not going to surrender to Krishna. And so therefore, in this situation, Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima are having to utilize the environment or the situation, understanding Jarasandha's mood, his identity, his personality, and the culture that he was brought up in, and knowing that he was respectful, because broadly the Brahminical class are held in higher esteem even than the Kshatriyas in Vedic culture, because of their renunciation and because of their learning, those two qualities. Learning, and then because of that learning, and learning not theoretical, but learning practical. In other words, vijnana, realized knowledge. And realized knowledge manifests in renunciation. Not even though there's recognition and there's position that comes from the advancement in spiritual learning that comes from the Brahmanas are detached from these things. That's not what they're seeking. And so we see that Jarasandha is naturally inclined to serve and to honour and respect the Brahmanas. And so Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima are leveraging that aspect of Jarasandha's character, knowing that he's not going to submit to Yudhishthira and ultimately not going to submit to Krishna. So in that context, a bit of trickery is okay. Huh? A bit of trickery is okay. Just like, parents trick their children. Hands up here, those of you who are parents. Do you use trickery on your children?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you have to. Here, eat this honey. Inside, there's a bitter medicine. But because the child's ill, you have to give them the medicine. Will they take the medicine voluntarily? No way. They won't even take it if you give it with the honey, sometimes. Have you ever had mumps? You know what mumps are? And you're very unpleasant. And it's super painful. I remember waking up in the morning with mumps. Oh, and Mum would say, here, take this, here, take your medicine. Like it was a Panadol or something like that, right? And you can have it with the honey. But even with the honey, oh, it hurts. Right? Even when it's sweet, it still hurts. So, in some contexts, we'll see the Brahmanas who are supposed to be truthful adjusting things a little bit, making adjustments, not always telling the absolute truth bluntly. Even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that words spoken in the mode of goodness are relishable, sweet, appreciable, truthful, but not harsh. is an interesting art. That's an art that Aussies have difficulty with, speaking the truth palatably. Some Indians too, by the way. They've been hanging around with the Aussies for too long. So, or there may be other excuses. So, cultures, it's very interesting how culture influences our behaviour, and unknowingly and very, very often because we grew up with it. You know? But especially, we need to be cognizant of these influences. So even though we're transcendentalists, right? You're not the body, Prabhu. You're a spirit soul, servant of Krishna. Right? Still, we need to be careful in how we deliver or present ourselves. And so we're seeing that here. Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima presenting themselves as Brahmanas. But in the next verse we see Jarasandha didn't fall for it. Right? He knew that they were Kshatriyas, but the culture is so powerful and so strong that even though he knows they're cheating, he's still obliged to, and that's tomorrow's more on that tomorrow. So very interesting. Does anybody have any comments or questions, thoughts?
So what is the right culture
The right culture?
for the devotee to develop?
Ooh. Good question. We developed the Chaitanya Vaishnava culture. Right? And so that's Kirtan, it's Bhagavad. Well, first of all, it's Sadhusanga. It's the association of the devotees, regardless of whether we're whatever we are. It's association with the devotees and chanting Hare Krishna. Right? So that we're cultivating Madhurya Rasa. It's quite elevated, but that's what we should be doing. We should be cultivating Braja Bhav. Huh? Is that right? This is what Lord Chaitanya wanted us to do. But of course, let's not get too carried away with ourselves. Because we've got to also so we have culture. Don't criticize devotees. Right? If we need to find out some information, be respectful. Inquire submissively. So what is it? 434. Pranipatena. Be respectful. Not are you? Huh? What do you think you're doing? Unless you're the temple president, maybe you might get away with it. But you may not. You may not. So the first thing is, samong. Treat everybody equally, be friendly with each other. Our culture's not actually that complicated. So in the association of devotees, be respectful. There will be some tough questions to ask on occasion, that's true, but we need to always be respectful first. And then pariprashna, right? What's a prashna? What's that mean? Question. Pariprashna means we can ask questions about everything, but always with the preface, pranipat. Be respectful. And then, what's the other quality that we have to have? Sevaya. A servant, like we were mentioning yesterday, the bhaktas. Right? He's a bhakta. Whatever you ask him to do, he'll do it with a smile on his face, and then he'll come back and say, is there anything else you'd like me to do? After he's just cleaned the toilet. What else do you want me to do, Prabhu? Throw out the rubbish, do the pots. Ah, joy. Yeah? So, always maintain a mood of a servant. And you know, what do we got? Don't criticise the devotees. Don't think the demigods are above Vishnu. So we always put Lord Vishnu above everybody else. We follow the orders of the spiritual master. And in our case, broadly, that means Prabhupada. Right? But also those following in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. We don't speculate. Right? Do you speculate? Are you a speculator? This is, you tell somebody you're a speculator. That's what I don't know what it's like now, but if you tell someone they're a speculator, that's like a huge insult. You speculator.
Yeah.
But we do speculate. Prabhupada does say, actually you can speculate, but our speculation is based on philosophical premises. Right? So there's speculation within parameters. Don't make things up, in other words. Which is very, very common, you know, in this day and age, in the internet era. Actually, I think it's broadly. You know, people jump to conclusions very quickly when they see apparent correlation. You know, something popped up and this popped up at the same time. Ah, they're connected. It may not be. So don't speculate, right? And you know, we accept Krishna. We accept Krishna's name as being non-different from him. This is, you know, above these offences. That's the top one. So our culture is one of chanting, supporting each other in our practice, sadhana, and follow the rules and regulations. Right? Don't commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting Hare Krishna. Don't think that our devotional practices are material activities, you know, that give us piety. They give us piety, but not on the basis of material acquisition. And the interesting one, number 9, is don't preach to the faithless. Right? Very interesting. I heard a funny comment, and actually I read it in Prabhupada's books. But Bhakti Swami this year in Mayapur said, preach, and if necessary, say some words. Right? If necessary, say something. Right? So in other words, again, culture. Culture trumps almost everything. So if we're behaving as Vaishnavas and dealing with everybody as Vaishnavas, and how we act speaks more than what we say. Speaks volumes. Right? So in that way we're going to influence people broadly over time rather than, you know, Savadama Purichaja Mamikam Saranam Raja. You know, do what I tell you to do, basically. And you know, the last of the 10 offences is broadly, don't be attached to material things. This is our culture, ultimately, right? As devotees. So that's all in support of chanting Hare Krishna, and we're chanting Hare Krishna japa, right? And kirtan, sometimes which is what we don't do enough of as a community, right? Because within that kirtan, it's so important. In fact, it's essential, because even though we are not necessarily on that Madhurya Bhava platform, by performing kirtan regularly as a group, we're able to access the Madhurya Rasa. Huh? We feel the mood of Vrindavan in kirtan. Isn't that amazing? So we're Bhakta Avas, right? A shadow of a Bhakta. Right? But when we're in kirtan, by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, we're elevated into the Madhurya, the experience of Madhurya Rasa. That's pretty far out, right? And so when we experience that, we kind of like, oh, yoo-hoo! We jump up and down, we shout, we bump into each other. Oh, sorry, Prabhu. Yeah? And we feel ecstasy. You know, it's what is it? Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipatam Purnam Amritas Vardhanam. It's the nectar for which we're always anxious. At the moment, we're thinking about breakfast. Right? But when you're in when we're in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan, that's what we aspire for. Huh? So, you know, we kind of, you know, when we see people come to the temple and they see the deities and, well, always very sober and mature, but the Hare Krishna devotees, they're jumping up and down, they're laughing, they're shouting, they lose all. Forget it. We're not into awe and reverence. We're into the intimacy and the company and the friendship, ultimately, of Brajabhav. And where you get that is in Kirtan, Sankirtan. So that's our culture. Kirtan is our culture, actually. And you see that's what Prabhupada did. Right? So, Bhagavatam is our culture, Kirtan is our culture, the Chaitanya Leela is our culture. Huh? So, we need to be practicing or following in the footsteps, manifesting the pastimes that we observe in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in ISKCON, in the ISKCON context. That's our culture. Good question. Okay. What is our culture? And when, you know, I can't say that I do it perfectly, but that's really what it is. And I'd highly recommend, if you haven't, read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because that's where, well, two things actually. First, read the Prabhupada Leela Amrita. Do that, right? Because that tells us the culture according to Prabhupada. But then if you want to understand Prabhupada and how he fits, you need to understand the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then you'll understand ISKCON and what ISKCON's purpose actually is. And it's give the holy name to people, right? And give them the philosophy. Why? Why do we chant? That's in the Bhagavad Gita, it's in the Bhagavatam, it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's in detail in the Nectar of Devotion. So, yeah, Kirtan and so the 5 angas of bhakti, was it? Sadhu Sangha, Nam Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Murti Seva, Maturavas. So, association of devotees, Sankirtan, Srimad Bhagavatam, Radha Sound Sundara, service to the deities, or at home, have your Shalagram or Gaunitai or puja at home. So that's Murti Seva. And then Maturavas. If you do all of those things, you'll be living in a sacred place. Maturavas means living in the Dharma. Literally it means living in Mathura or Vrindavan. But
That was a schedule.
confirm.
Oh, okay.
We've been hanging out.
Confirm. We're living in a sacred place. ISKCON Adelaide is a sacred place. It is. What happened there?
That was a scheduled power. Scheduled power. It's very maintenance.
Schedule out.
In
The whole children on the
the area.
until 3 o'clock.
Okay, 3 o'clock. Ooh.
The influence of the deities is very expansive. It's 8 or 10 kilometers around the site.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's 10 kilometers.
Prabhu, you mentioned Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Srimad
Now,
Bhagavatam.
these are the Panchanga Bhakti, the Prema Bhakti, impetuses for Prema Bhakti. And that's what we want. We want to be Prema Bhaktas. Right? Not that we're walking around the place swooning, whoa, but,
Kirtan Adelaide. Leave a like and subscribe.